Shalom everyone to Living with the Times. This week's Parsha Tetzaveh is all about the clothing of the Kohanim, and especially the Kohen Gadol. The Torah goes into great detail about this. So to really understand the importance of clothing, we have to go back to the Garden of Eden, where we see that originally Adam and Eve were naked and they were not ashamed. And then they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which they had been commanded not to eat from. And immediately it says that they realized that they were naked and they tried to cover themselves up. Later, when they were expelled from the garden, so it says that God made for them garments of skin and he dressed them. So in Hebrew, the word for skin is or, ayin vav resh, which sounds almost exactly like the word for light, aleph vav resh. The only difference is Aleph is for light, and the ayin is for skin. And so the commentaries tell us, in essence, what was happening here is Adam and Eve were on a very, very high level. They had, as it were, light bodies. And through eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they exchanged light bodies for bodies of skin. They became more material and physical. So we see that in Hebrew, the word for a garment, for clothing, is beged, begadim. And we're told that the same root of beged is boged. Boged means someone who is in a state of rebellion or disloyal or a traitor. This word boged is all of these things. And so when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they rebelled against God. They were disloyal to God. And so the first action or reaction to their eating from the tree is they realized that they were naked. But what does that mean? They felt vulnerable. They felt empty. They had been disloyal to their own destiny in this world. And so they felt naked of mitzvot. They had one mitzvah to keep, and they didn't do that, so they felt naked. And so clothing in its original form was to cover up their shame, to cover up their mistake, cover up their sin, however we want to put it. And so therefore, it has the same root as rebellion, disloyalty, and treachery. There's another statement, a very, very important statement, that says that sometimes a blemish or the way something is spoiled becomes the rectification of that entity or situation. And we know this from life, that sometimes what appears to be a personal failure or a terrible occurrence, that later we come to realize that through that we grew in a way that it actually helped to fix ourselves. So here, clothing begins with we'll call it a very, very bad reputation. And yet, it has turned into something very positive. That's why in this Torah portion, clothing is called for glory and for splendor. That when the Kohanim dressed and the Kohen Gadol dressed, it represented really the expression of the soul. And so here we see something very, very deep, that in today's Jewish lifestyle, what's called tzniut, modesty, is a very, very important principle. And modesty means a lot of things. It could be modesty of speech, modesty in actions, but in great part, it has to do with modesty in clothing. And we can see from the Western world, where it seems that the more skin is exposed, the more trendy it is. But in our point of view, what this is showing is that a person is showing off their body as if they're advertising. I'm a body. Don't look at my mind. Don't look at my soul. Don't look at my intellect or my emotions. I'm a body. Now, of course, we believe that we're not bodies that happen to have souls. We're souls that are enclosed in bodies. And so the idea of modesty through clothing has become a very, very positive thing. And so here we see what's called nahafochu. This is like the most important word of the Megillah, that everything, all of the terrible plans of Haman were nahafochu. They were turned around completely to a complete redemption and salvation. And so the same thing with clothing. Initially, clothing was a sign of shame, of sin. But here, we've actually turned it into something very, very positive. And so modest dress is a very, very important part of Jewish tradition. And we could see this very, very much in the clothes that we wear for Shabbat or holidays. And so there's an expression or a question, do clothes make the person? Well, the answer in a certain way is yes, the clothes make the person. And so if one is dressed totally immodestly, that's making a statement of what they're advertising, who they feel they are. And when a person wears modest clothing, it's saying, I'm a soul in a body. And the body is very important, but basically, I'm a soul. Now, the idea of wearing modest clothing doesn't mean that we're supposed to be schlumps. And we can see this, that we're told that we're not supposed to wear torn clothes or stained clothes. And on Shabbat, we do try to dress, just like the Kohanim in the temple. When they did the service in the temple, they dressed up. That's why, for example, if someone is working in their yard and it comes time to daven mincha or ma'ariv, the afternoon or evening prayer, most times a person will take a few minutes and change their clothes to go to synagogue. Because what we wear when we're working in the garden isn't what we wear when we stand before God. Now, there's a famous saying, don't tell a book by its cover. Or like we said before, don't look at a person's clothing. But the truth is, we do. Everyone looks at the cover of a book. I know very well. I've published many books, and I put a lot of energy into making a beautiful cover because that's the first thing a person sees. First appearances. And so here it's a bit paradoxical that we don't want to judge a person by their outside appearance, but in a certain way, first appearances are important. And the Jewish people are God's representatives in the world. I remember a story I heard from Reb Shlomo. He told it about his father. When Reb Shlomo was younger, one time his mother asked his father to go to this local store and get a few things for dinner. And so before he went out, Reb Shlomo saw that he stood in front of the mirror and he straightened his jacket and his tie, made sure his hair was in place. And he saw through the mirror Reb Shlomo looking at him like a little questionable. In other words, you're just going to the grocery store. Like, he got the impression that Reb Shlomo thought he was vain. And so his father turned to him and said that we are representatives of God in this world. When I walk out in the street, people look at me as a representative of God. And therefore, it behooves me to be clean and neat and carry myself with dignity, not overdue pride, but just simple understanding of who I am and what I represent in this world. So hopefully this gives us a little bit of insight into why the Torah spends so much time explaining these clothings, because for all the reasons we explained, we are God's representative in the world. And it is important, not only in our clothing, in our speech, our morals, our ethics, our business ethics, to represent godliness in the world.